My husband knew my darkest secret and used it to control me until I fought back. If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button because you're about to hear the most twisted psychological thriller that actually happened. This story has more twists than a roller coaster, and I guarantee you won't see the ending coming. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because this journey is going to shake you to your core. The coffee mug slipped from my hands at exactly 6:47 a.m., shattering against the kitchen floor in a pattern that looked disturbingly like blood spatter. I stood frozen, staring at the brown liquid seeping between the white tiles, and for a moment I was 20 years younger, standing in a different kitchen looking at actual blood. "Elena, what was that noise?" Marcus's voice drifted from the living room, that careful tone he used when he was pretending to be concerned but was actually cataloging every mistake I made. I grabbed the paper towels, my hands shaking slightly as I cleaned up the mess. "Just dropped my mug," I called back, forcing my voice to sound normal. "You've been dropping a lot of things lately. Maybe you should see Dr. Kim about those tremors." There it was, the subtle suggestion that something was wrong with me, wrapped in the guise of caring. I'd been married to Marcus Chen for 3 years, and he'd perfected the art of making me question my own competence while maintaining the facade of a devoted husband. I walked into the living room where Marcus sat in his wheelchair, positioned perfectly to catch the morning light streaming through our Minneapolis apartment windows. He looked up from his laptop with that expression I'd come to know so well. Part concern, part disappointment, all control. "Are you okay, sweetheart? You seem stressed." Marcus was 52, still handsome despite the supposed chronic pain from his workplace accident 2 years ago. Dark hair with distinguished silver at the temples, sharp brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and that smile that had first attracted me at the community center where I volunteered. He'd been charming, then vulnerable, needing someone with medical experience to understand his condition. "I'm fine," I said, settling into my usual spot on the couch where I could easily reach anything he might need. "Just tired." "You worked late again last night." "Elena, I've told you, you don't need to push yourself so hard at the clinic. We have my disability payments, and I worry about you burning out." The concern in his voice sounded so genuine that for a moment I almost believed it. But I'd learned to listen to what Marcus didn't say as much as what he did. He worried about me burning out because my job as a part-time nurse at the family clinic was my only connection to the outside world, my only source of independence. I was Elena Martinez, 54 years old, and I used to be someone who saved lives. 25 years as a psychiatric nurse specializing in trauma and crisis intervention. I'd talked people off ledges, literally and figuratively. I'd been strong, confident, unshakable. Now I couldn't even hold a coffee mug without my hands trembling. "Dr. Patterson wants to see you next week," Marcus continued, scrolling through his phone, "for your physical therapy evaluation." Dr. Patterson was Marcus's physical therapist, a young man who seemed perpetually nervous around me. I'd noticed how Marcus's capabilities seemed to fluctuate depending on who was watching. With Dr. Patterson, he could barely transfer from his chair to the examination table. At home, when he thought I wasn't looking, his movements were surprisingly fluid. "I can drive you," I offered. "Actually, I arranged for medical transport. You've been doing too much, Elena. I can handle some things myself." The dismissal stung, but I'd learned not to argue. Arguments with Marcus were exercises in futility that left me feeling gaslit and confused. He had a way of turning every conversation around until I was apologizing for things I hadn't done wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from Isabella, my 19-year-old foster daughter who lived in the dorms at the University of Minnesota. "Mom, can we talk later?" Something weird happened with Tyler Brooks. Isabella had been dating him for 3 months, and something about the young man made my professional instincts prickle. He was possessive in ways that reminded me of things I tried not to think about. "Isabella wants to talk," I told Marcus. "About Tyler again." He shook his head with that indulgent smile he used when discussing what he called my overprotective tendencies. "Elena, you need to let her make her own mistakes. You can't save everyone." The words hit deeper than they should have. I couldn't save everyone. I knew that better than most people. I'd learned it in the most brutal way possible 20 years ago in a different life when I was married to a different man who had very different methods of control. Marcus didn't know about David. At least I didn't think he did. David Martinez had been my first husband, Isabella's biological father, though she'd been too young to remember him when he died. David had been a master of physical intimidation, where Marcus was a master of psychological manipulation. David used his fists. Marcus used my own mind against me. But David was dead, and I was the one who killed him. It had been self-defense clear-cut enough that the district attorney hadn't even pressed charges. But knowing something legally and feeling it emotionally were two different things. I'd carried that weight for 2 decades, the knowledge that I was capable of killing another human being when pushed far enough. Marcus's laptop chimed with an incoming video call. "It's my support group," he said, wheeling toward his office. "The chronic pain group meets every Tuesday morning." I nodded, settling deeper into the couch. Marcus's support group was another one of those things that seemed perfectly reasonable on the surface, but felt wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. He'd joined it 6 months ago, claiming he needed to connect with others who understood invisible disabilities. As his office door closed, I heard his voice change, becoming more animated, more normal. The careful, pained tone he used around me disappeared, replaced by something that sounded almost cheerful. I told myself I was imagining it. Marcus had good days and bad days. Today was apparently a good day. My phone rang, Isabella calling instead of texting. That meant whatever had happened with Tyler was serious. "Mom," her voice was small, uncertain. "Can you meet me for lunch? I need to tell you something and I don't want to do it over the phone." "Of course, sweetheart. Are you okay?" I think so. Maybe. I don't know." She paused. "Mom, you used to work with people who had problems, right? Like psychological problems." My blood went cold. "Isabella, what happened?" "Tyler got angry last night. Really angry. And the way he looked at me." She trailed off. "It reminded me of something, but I can't remember what. Something from when I was little." Isabella had been 3 when David died. She shouldn't remember anything from that time, but trauma had a way of leaving impressions that surfaced in unexpected moments. "Where do you want to meet?" I asked, already reaching for my keys. "The coffee shop on campus. Brewster's. And Mom, don't tell Marcus about this, okay? He always makes me feel like I'm overreacting." After hanging up, I sat in the silence of our apartment, listening to the muffled sound of Marcus's voice from his office. Cheerful, animated, nothing like the careful cadence of a man in chronic pain. I walked quietly to his office door and pressed my ear against it. "The key is consistency," Marcus was saying. "You can't let them see you as capable one day and disabled the next. They start to question everything." My heart stopped. "Elena's getting suspicious, but that's normal around the 3-year mark. They start to feel trapped, start looking for inconsistencies. That's when you have to be smarter." I backed away from the door, my mind reeling. Marcus wasn't talking to a chronic pain support group. He was talking to other men about controlling their wives. I grabbed my purse and keys, moving as quietly as possible toward the front door. I needed to get to Isabella, needed to think, needed to understand what I'd just heard. As I reached for the doorknob, Marcus's office door opened. "Elena, where are you going?" I turned, studying his face. He looked exactly the same as always, concerned, caring, slightly pained. But now I could see the calculation behind his eyes, the way he was assessing my expression, looking for signs of suspicion. "Isabella called. She wants to have lunch." "Is everything okay with Tyler?" The question seemed innocent enough, but something in his tone made me pause. How did he know this was about Tyler? I hadn't mentioned Tyler's name during our brief conversation. "She didn't say. Probably just college drama." Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Drive carefully, sweetheart. You seem distracted today." I nodded and left, but as I walked to my car, I could feel him watching me from the window. The weight of his gaze felt different now. Not protective, but predatory. The drive to campus gave me 20 minutes to think, and by the time I parked at Brewster's, I'd started to piece together a pattern I'd been too close to see. The subtle ways Marcus had isolated me from my old friends from the hospital. The way he'd convinced me to reduce my hours at the clinic. The constant suggestions that I was fragile, forgetful, possibly developing early-onset dementia like my mother. Isabella was waiting in a corner booth, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, her usually bright demeanor subdued. She looked so much like I had at her age, determined but vulnerable, strong but still learning the difference between love and control. "Mom." She stood to hug me, and I could feel the tension in her shoulders. "Tell me what happened." Isabella sat back down, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. "Tyler and I went to dinner last night. Nothing fancy, just the pizza place near campus. But when we got there, my friend Sarah was there with her boyfriend." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I went over to say hi, and when I came back to the table, Tyler was different. Angry. He said I was disrespecting him by leaving him alone, that I cared more about my friends than about him. The familiar chill ran down my spine. I'd heard similar words before in a different voice in a different decade. What did you do? I tried to explain that I was just being polite, but he got angrier. He said, she looked down at her hands. He said that if I really loved him, I wouldn't need other people, that he should be enough for me. My professional training kicked in, classic isolation tactics. How did you respond? I told him that was crazy, that friends are important, and that's when he... She touched her wrist gently. He grabbed my arm, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough that I knew he could if he wanted to. The world tilted slightly. I could see David's hands on my own wrists, could feel the careful pressure that was just shy of leaving marks. Isabella, look at me. I waited until she met my eyes. That's not normal behavior. That's not how someone who loves you should react. But he apologized afterward. He said he was stressed about midterms, that he didn't mean it. He brought me flowers this morning. The apology, the flowers, the explanation. The cycle I knew so well. Sweetheart, stress doesn't make someone grab their girlfriend. And if it did, it would happen once and never again, because they'd be horrified by their own behavior. Isabella nodded slowly. That's what I kept thinking. And then I remembered something. She looked up at me with eyes that were suddenly much older than 19. I remembered a man being angry at you when I was little. I remembered hiding in my room while there was yelling downstairs. My breath caught. Isabella, I don't remember details, just feelings, fear, and the sound of something breaking. Then later you holding me and crying, telling me we were safe now. I reached across the table and took her hand. You were 3. What you're remembering is real. But that man can't hurt us anymore. What happened to him? 20 years of careful silence, of protecting her from the truth, of carrying the weight alone. But looking at Isabella now, seeing the fear in her eyes that mirrored my own at her age, I realized that silence hadn't protected her. It had left her unprepared to recognize the same patterns. He died, I said simply. And yes, it was complicated. But what matters now is that you're smart enough to recognize warning signs that I missed at your age. Isabella squeezed my hand. Will you help me break up with Tyler? I don't think I should do it alone. Of course. The relief in her voice made my chest tight. But Isabella, there's something else I need to tell you. About Marcus. I told her about the conversation I'd overheard, about the inconsistencies I'd been noticing, about the growing feeling that I was being manipulated in ways I was only beginning to understand. Mom, that's terrifying. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How's lunch with Isabella? Hope Tyler isn't causing too much drama. I stared at the message. I hadn't told him we were meeting for lunch. I'd only said Isabella wanted to meet. Isabella, when you called this morning, did you mention anything to Tyler about wanting to talk to me? No, I haven't talked to Tyler since last night. Why? Another text from Marcus. By the way, I invited Tyler over for dinner tomorrow night. Thought it would be nice for all of us to get to know each other better. My hand started shaking again, but this time it wasn't from stress. It was from recognition. The way Marcus was inserting himself into Isabella's situation, the way he seemed to know things he shouldn't know, the timing of his sudden interest in Tyler. Isabella, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't go back to your dorm alone today. Come home with me, but not to my apartment. We're going somewhere else first. Where? To see someone who specializes in the kind of manipulation I think we're both dealing with. As we left the coffee shop, I caught a glimpse of a familiar car parked across the street. Tyler's blue Honda. He was sitting behind the wheel watching us. I took Isabella's arm and guided her quickly to my car, checking the rearview mirror as we drove away. The Honda followed us for 3 blocks before turning off, but the message was clear. We were being watched. The drive to Dr. Sarah Kim's office gave me time to think about how much my life had changed in the span of 2 hours. This morning I'd been a woman questioning her own perceptions, wondering if she was losing her mind. Now I was a woman beginning to understand that her mind was being systematically dismantled by someone who knew exactly which buttons to push. Dr. Kim had been my therapist 20 years ago after David's death. She'd helped me process the trauma, the guilt, the fear that I might be capable of violence again. She was one of the few people who knew the complete truth about what had happened that night. Elena, Dr. Kim said as she opened her office door. I was surprised to get your call, and you must be Isabella. Dr. Kim was in her late 40s now. her black hair streaked with silver, but her eyes were as sharp and compassionate as I remembered. Her office felt like a sanctuary, soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and an atmosphere that encouraged honesty. Dr. Kim, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. In your professional opinion, am I showing signs of dementia or any other cognitive decline? She studied me carefully. Elena, you seem as sharp as ever. Why are you asking? I told her everything. The coffee mug incident, Marcus's subtle suggestions about my mental state, the conversation I'd overheard, Isabella's situation with Tyler. As I spoke, I watched Dr. Kim's expression grow increasingly concerned. Elena, what you're describing sounds like systematic psychological abuse. The gaslighting, the isolation, the way he's undermining your confidence. These are classic tactics. But he's disabled, he's in chronic pain, I'm supposed to be taking care of him. According to who, his doctors, or just according to him? The question hung in the air. I realized I'd never actually spoken to Marcus's doctors directly. All of my information about his condition came from Marcus himself. Dr. Kim, Isabella said quietly, can I ask you something? If someone wanted to find out information about my mom, about her past, how would they do it? Dr. Kim's expression sharpened. What kind of information? Legal records, court cases, things that might be public but not easy to find unless you knew where to look. The room went very quiet. Dr. Kim looked at me with an expression I recognized from 20 years ago. The look she'd worn when she was helping me understand that I wasn't the monster I thought I was. Elena, is there any way Marcus could know about David? The question I'd been avoiding finally crystallized into words. I don't see how. I never told him. The only people who know are you, my lawyer from back then, and the police officers who worked the case. Court records are public. If someone knew your maiden name, knew approximately when and where to look, they could piece together the basic facts. My mind raced back through the early days of my relationship with Marcus. How had we met at the community center where I volunteered helping with a support group for accident victims? I'd been there because helping others deal with trauma helped me process my own. But what if I hadn't found Marcus? What if Marcus had found me? Dr. Kim, I need to ask you for a favor. Can you call Dr. Patterson, that's Marcus's physical therapist, and ask about his actual condition? As a professional consultation, I can try, but patient confidentiality. Tell him you're concerned about the mental health impact on the spouse. That's legitimate, right? She nodded slowly. I'll make the call. While Dr. Kim stepped out to use the phone in the outer office, Isabella and I sat in the therapeutic silence I remembered from 2 decades ago. Mom, are you scared? Terrified, I admitted. But not of Marcus. I'm scared of what I might have to do if this gets worse. What do you mean? Before I could answer, Dr. Kim returned, her face pale. Elena, we have a problem. Dr. Patterson says Marcus graduated from physical therapy 8 months ago. He was cleared for full activity and returned to work. There's no ongoing treatment, no chronic pain management, no legitimate medical reason for disability. The words hit me like a physical blow. 8 months ago. That was around the time Marcus had started suggesting I reduce my hours at the clinic, around the time he'd begun his campaign to convince me I was becoming forgetful and unstable. There's more, Dr. Kim continued. Dr. Patterson mentioned that Marcus specifically requested that no progress reports be sent home. He said his wife was overprotective, and that updates about his improvement would cause her to push him too hard. I stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside Minneapolis looked normal. People going about their lives unaware that inside this office, a woman was realizing her entire reality had been constructed by someone who saw her as nothing more than a project to be managed. He's been lying about everything, I said to the window. It appears so. Elena, this level of deception combined with the psychological manipulation you've described suggests someone with antisocial tendencies, someone who sees relationships as games to be won rather than connections to be cherished. I turned back to face them. Dr. Kim, there's something else. Something I should have told you from the beginning. I told them about the conversation I'd overheard about Marcus apparently coaching other men on how to control their wives. About the support group that wasn't really a support group. He's not just doing this to me. He's teaching other people how to do it. The implications of that settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Marcus wasn't just an abusive husband. He was someone who took pride in abuse, who had systemized it, who was spreading his techniques to others. Mom, Isabella said quietly, we have to stop him. We have to be smart about it, Dr. Kim interjected. Someone this calculating, this skilled at manipulation, he'll have prepared for the possibility of discovery. Elena, you need to assume that he knows you're becoming suspicious. As if summoned by her words, my phone buzzed with another text from Marcus Hope. Your meeting with Dr. Kim is going well. See you at home for dinner. I stared at the message, my blood turning to ice. I never told him I was seeing Dr. Kim today. The room went silent except for the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. Somehow Marcus knew exactly where I was and who I was with, which meant he'd been watching me far longer than I'd realized. And if he knew about Dr. Kim, if he'd done research into my past the way I was beginning to suspect he had, then he knew about David. He knew I was capable of killing. Elena, Dr. Kim said carefully, I think you and Isabella should stay somewhere else tonight. But as I looked at my phone at Marcus's message that felt less like communication and more like a threat, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. There might not be anywhere we could go that Marcus hadn't already anticipated. The predator had been patient, methodical and thorough, and I was only just beginning to understand the size of the trap he'd built around me. As we prepared to leave Dr. Kim's office, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror by her door. The woman looking back at me had the same face I'd worn 20 years ago, determined, frightened, but no longer willing to be a victim. The difference was 20 years ago I'd been fighting for my life. This time I was fighting for my sanity, and I was beginning to suspect that for Marcus those might be the same thing. The silence in my car as Isabella and I drove away from Dr. Kim's office felt different from any silence I'd experienced before. It wasn't peaceful or contemplative. It was the silence of two people who had just discovered they were living in a carefully constructed lie. Mom, your hands are shaking again. I looked down at my grip on the steering wheel. Isabella was right. But this time I knew the shaking wasn't from some mysterious neurological condition Marcus had been planting in my mind. It was from the adrenaline of finally seeing clearly. Where are we going? Isabella asked as I took the exit toward downtown Minneapolis instead of heading home. To get answers. The Minneapolis Public Library's main branch had always been my sanctuary when I needed to research something thoroughly. During my nursing career, I'd spent countless hours here looking up case studies and treatment protocols. Now I was going to research my own husband. We found a quiet corner on the 3rd floor away from the main foot traffic. I opened my laptop and began the search I should have done 3 years ago before I'd let Marcus move into my life and my apartment. What exactly are we looking for? Isabella asked, pulling up a chair beside me. Everything. Employment records, education, previous addresses, social media presence. If Marcus has been planning this as long as I think he has, there will be a trail. I started with the basics. Marcus Chen, age 52, supposedly a software engineer who'd been injured in a workplace accident. The story he'd told me was that he'd fallen from a defective platform while inspecting server equipment, resulting in chronic back pain and mobility issues. The first red flag came within minutes. According to LinkedIn, Marcus had indeed worked as a software engineer, but for a company that had gone out of business 4 years ago. A full year before his supposed accident. The timeline didn't match. Mom, look at this. Isabella had been searching social media while I focused on employment records. Her screen showed a Facebook profile for Marcus Chen, but not the one I knew. This Marcus was standing upright at what appeared to be a hiking trail, arms raised in victory, the timestamp showing it was posted just 6 months ago. He told me he couldn't walk more than a few blocks without severe pain, I whispered. There's more. Isabella scrolled through the profile. Look at these check-ins. Rock climbing gym, martial arts studio. These are all from the past 2 years. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The Marcus in these photos was active, healthy, vibrant, nothing like the carefully fragile man who lived in my apartment. But it was the next discovery that made me understand just how deep this deception went. Elena, look at this. Isabella's voice had gone very quiet. There's a whole album titled Research Projects. The album was filled with screenshots, court records, newspaper articles, public documents, but not random ones. These were all connected to cases involving women who had killed their abusive husbands in self-defense. My case was there. David's death, my trial, my acquittal. But so were dozens of others. Marcus had compiled what looked like a database of women who had been pushed to their breaking point. Oh God, I breathed. He's been studying us. Us. I clicked through the screenshots, my nursing training helping me organize the information clinically, even as my personal terror threatened to overwhelm me. These aren't random cases, Isabella. Look at the patterns. All of these women were healthcare workers or teachers. All of them had some kind of professional training in helping others. All of them had been isolated from their support systems before they fought back. Isabella was reading over my shoulder. Mom, this one woman, Linda Patterson. Her case looks almost identical to yours. Abusive husband, years of escalation one night when she had to choose between her life and his. I clicked on Linda's case, my blood running cold as I read the details. Linda Patterson, former trauma nurse, had killed her husband 3 years ago after he'd beaten her so severely that she'd suffered permanent hearing loss in one ear. She'd been acquitted on grounds of self-defense. And according to these screenshots, Linda Patterson was now married to someone named Michael Torres. Isabella searched for Michael Torres. It took her 30 seconds to find what we were both afraid of. Michael Torres' social media showed the same pattern. Photos of an active, healthy man posted from private profiles, while his public presence suggested disability and chronic illness. He's not the only one, I said, my voice barely audible. Marcus isn't working alone. We spent the next hour mapping out what appeared to be a network of men who specifically targeted women with histories of survival. The pattern was consistent across at least 6 cases. We could identify men who researched vulnerable women, crafted elaborate deceptions to gain their trust, then systematically broke them down using their own protective instincts against them. But why? Isabella asked. What do they get out of it? I thought about the conversation I'd overheard that morning about Marcus coaching other men on control techniques. Power, and maybe something else. Look at this. I'd found something that made my stomach turn. A private forum accessible only through cached pages and archived links where men discussed their projects. The language was clinical detached, like they were discussing experiments rather than human lives. Subject shows increased dependency after isolation from workplace colleagues, one post read. Recommend gradual introduction of memory doubt techniques. Mine is responding well to gaslighting about her medication schedule, read another. She started asking me to remind her about everything. And then I found Marcus's posts. Elena is more challenging than previous subjects. Her medical background makes her naturally analytical. Have had to be more subtle with physical symptoms manipulation. Currently implementing Phase 3, introduction of external stressor through foster daughter's relationship. The words hit me like a physical blow. Tyler. Tyler wasn't just some random abusive boyfriend Isabella had encountered. He was part of Marcus's plan. Isabella, we need to call Tyler right now. What, Mom? No. I don't want to talk to him. Not to talk to him. To find out where he is. Because if I'm right about this, you're in more danger than either of us realized. Isabella reluctantly pulled up Tyler's contact information. As she dialed, I continued reading Marcus's posts, each one revealing another layer of the trap he'd built around us. Phase 4 will involve escalation of the foster daughter situation. Subject's protective instincts toward the girl are her primary vulnerability. Expecting emotional breakdown within 2 weeks. Tyler's phone is going straight to voicemail, Isabella said. Try calling his roommate. Try anyone who might know where he is. While Isabella made calls, I scrolled through more of Marcus's posts looking for information about his endgame. What was Phase 5? What was the ultimate goal of this elaborate psychological torture? I found my answer in a post dated just 2 weeks ago. Subject Elena, approaching optimal vulnerability state. Recommend preparation for final phase, recreating trauma conditions from previous marriage. Subject has demonstrated capacity for lethal violence when cornered. Documentation of erratic behavior, now sufficient for commitment proceedings if final phase is unsuccessful. My hands went completely still on the keyboard. Marcus wasn't just trying to control me. He was trying to push me to the point where I would either kill again, giving him complete power over me through blackmail, or have a complete psychological breakdown that would allow him to have me committed. Either way, I would disappear. And Isabella would be left alone with Tyler. Mom, Tyler's roommate says he moved out yesterday. Didn't say where he was going, just packed up his stuff and left. I closed the laptop with shaking hands. Isabella, we need to leave. Now. Where are we going? Somewhere safe while I figure out our next move. But even as I said it, I wondered if there was anywhere Marcus hadn't already anticipated we might go. As we gathered our things and headed for the elevator, my phone rang. Marcus. Elena, where are you? You missed dinner and I was getting worried. His voice was perfect. Just the right amount of concern, just the right hint of hurt feelings. If I hadn't read his posts, if I didn't know what he really was, I might have felt guilty for making him worry. I'm with Isabella. We're working through some things with Tyler. Oh no, what happened? Is she okay? The performance was flawless. He already knew exactly what had happened because he'd orchestrated it. She's fine. We'll talk about it when I get home. Elena, you sound upset. Is there something you're not telling me? You know you can talk to me about anything. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced. Part of me, the part that had been conditioned over 3 years, wanted to confess everything to seek comfort from the very person who was causing my distress. I'm just tired, Marcus. I'll see you later. Drive safely. I love you. The words felt like acid in my ears. After hanging up, I realized Isabella was staring at me. Mom, you're really good at that. Acting normal when you're terrified. I've had practice. We drove in silence toward the hotel I'd chosen, a small place on the outskirts of the city where I could pay cash and avoid using credit cards that Marcus might be monitoring. As we checked in under false names, I couldn't shake the feeling that even this move had been anticipated. Our room was on the 3rd floor with a view of the parking lot. As I closed the curtains, I caught a glimpse of a familiar car pulling into the lot below. Tyler's blue Honda. Isabella, get away from the window. What's wrong? Tyler's here. The impossibility of it hit me like a physical blow. There was no way Tyler could have tracked us here through coincidence, which meant Marcus had known where we were going before we'd even decided ourselves. Mom, how is that possible? I thought about the phone calls we'd made, the credit card I'd almost used before switching to cash the location services on our phones. Marcus was a software engineer. He would know exactly how to track us electronically. Isabella, turn off your phone. Completely off, not just silent. As she powered down her phone, I did the same with mine. Then I moved to the window and carefully peered through a gap in the curtains. Tyler was sitting in his car, but he wasn't alone. There was an older man in the passenger seat, someone I didn't recognize. They appeared to be waiting. We're not safe here, I said. Then where can we go? Before I could answer, there was a knock at our door. Not a tentative knock from hotel staff, but the confident knock of someone who knew exactly which room we were in. Elena, Isabella, it's Tyler. I know you're in there. Isabella, we need to talk. I grabbed Isabella's hand and pulled her toward the bathroom, the only room in the suite without windows. As we moved, Tyler's voice continued from the hallway. Isabella, I'm sorry about last night. I was stressed and I took it out on you. That's not who I am. But running away isn't going to solve anything. The words were perfect. Exactly what an abusive boyfriend would say after a confrontation. But the delivery was wrong. There was no emotion in it, no genuine distress. It sounded like someone reading lines. From the bathroom, I heard the distinctive sound of a key card being inserted into our door. Isabella, is there another way out of here? She pointed toward the small window in the bathroom. Maybe, but it's a 3-story drop. The main door to our room opened and Tyler's voice got closer. Elena, I know this seems scary, but Marcus sent me to bring you home. He's worried about you. He thinks you might be having some kind of breakdown. I looked at Isabella and saw my own realization reflected in her eyes. This wasn't just about isolating and controlling us anymore. This was about implementing Marcus's final phase, making it look like I was having a psychotic break. Isabella, Tyler continued, his voice now just outside the bathroom door. Your mom needs professional help. The kind of help that Marcus can arrange for her, but she has to come home first. The bathroom door handle turned slowly. That's when I made a decision that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago, when I was still the woman who believed love meant sacrifice and service. I was not going to be anyone's victim ever again. I grabbed the heavy ceramic toilet tank lid and positioned myself beside the door. Isabella, when I say run, you go out that window. I don't care if it's 3 stories. You run and you don't stop until you find help. Mom, I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. Because if something happens to me, you're the only one who knows the truth about Marcus. You're the only one who can stop him from doing this to other women. The door opened and Tyler stepped into the bathroom. His expression was calm, confident. The look of someone who believed he was in complete control of the situation. He wasn't expecting a 54-year-old nurse to come at him with a toilet tank lid. The impact sent him reeling backward into the main room, and I heard the satisfying sound of him hitting the wall hard enough to knock the wind out of him. Isabella, go. But instead of going out the window, Isabella grabbed the lamp from the bedside table and brought it down on Tyler's head as he tried to get up. I said I'm not leaving you. For a moment, Tyler was down, but I could hear footsteps in the hallway. The older man from the car was coming. The window now. This time, Isabella didn't argue. We climbed out onto the narrow ledge outside the bathroom window. It was a longer drop than 3 stories. The hotel was built on a slope, and this side faced the steep part. But there was a dumpster below us, and sometimes you have to choose between definite danger and probable danger. On 3, I said. We jumped. The impact with the dumpster was brutal, but not fatal. Isabella landed better than I did. She was younger, more flexible. I felt something in my left shoulder pop as I hit, and the pain was immediate and intense. But we were alive and we were free. Mom, you're hurt. I'm fine. We need to move. We climbed out of the dumpster and looked around. We were in an alley behind the hotel with no immediate way to call for help since our phones were still in the room. There's a gas station across the street, Isabella said. They'll have a phone. As we made our way toward the street, I heard voices from the hotel window we'd just escaped through. Tyler was conscious again, and he was angry. They went out the window. Check the alley. We ran. The gas station attendant took one look at us. 2 women, one bleeding from a shoulder injury, both looking like we'd just climbed out of a dumpster, which we had, and immediately offered to call the police. Yes, I said, and we need an ambulance. While we waited for emergency services, I used the gas station phone to call Dr. Kim. Elena, what happened? You sound terrible. Marcus knows we figured it out. He sent Tyler after us. We're at the Speedway on Lyndale Avenue. Can you meet us at the hospital? I'm on my way. The police arrived first, followed quickly by paramedics. As the EMTs checked my shoulder, I gave the officers a condensed version of what we'd discovered. But even as I spoke, I could see the skepticism in their eyes. It sounded insane. A network of men targeting survivor women. Elaborate psychological manipulation. A husband who had researched my past and built a 3-year deception around it. Ma'am, one of the officers said gently, these are serious accusations. We'll need to see some evidence. Our laptops are back at the hotel in the room. Everything we found is there. We'll send officers to check it out. But I already knew what they would find. Nothing. Marcus was too smart to leave evidence lying around once he knew we were on to him. By the time we reached the hospital, my shoulder had been diagnosed as dislocated but not broken. As the doctor worked to reset it, Isabella sat beside my bed, still holding the printouts we'd managed to grab from the library. Mom, what if the police don't believe us? What if they think we're making this up? It was a valid concern. Everything we'd discovered could be explained away by a skilled manipulator. The social media posts could be dismissed as fakes. The forum posts could be claimed as fiction. The coincidences could be attributed to paranoia. Then we make them believe us, I said. How? By giving them something they can't dismiss. Dr. Kim arrived as I was being discharged. She took one look at us and immediately went into professional mode. Elena, you're both in shock. You need somewhere safe to stay while we figure out the next steps. There is no safe place. Marcus anticipated this. He's been planning for the possibility of discovery for years. Then we change the game, Dr. Kim said. We stop reacting to his plans and start making our own. That's when I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. I'd been thinking like a victim trying to escape and hide, but I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was someone with knowledge, with evidence, with a professional background that Marcus had underestimated. Dr. Kim, you still have contacts at the State Board of Mental Health, right? Yes, why? Because I think it's time to stop running from Marcus and start hunting him. The look on Isabella's face was one I'd never seen before, pride mixed with fierce determination. What do you need me to do? She asked. First, we need to contact Linda Patterson and the other women Marcus and his friends have targeted, because I guarantee they have stories to tell. And then we build a case that even Marcus Chen can't manipulate his way out of. As we left the hospital, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years, the sensation of being the hunter instead of the prey. Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed that because I'd killed once before, I was fundamentally broken, fundamentally controllable. But what he'd failed to understand was that killing David hadn't broken me. It had taught me exactly how far I was willing to go to protect the people I loved. And this time I wasn't going to wait until the last possible moment to fight back. The safe house Dr. Kim arranged for us was actually her sister's cabin, 30 minutes outside Minneapolis. As we drove there in Dr. Kim's car, mine was presumably being monitored, I felt the familiar weight of decision settling in my chest. The same weight I'd carried 20 years ago in those final days with David, when I'd known that one of us wasn't going to survive much longer. But this time was different. This time I wasn't fighting for my life in a moment of desperate self-defense. This time I was choosing to fight. "Elena," Dr. Kim said as we pulled into the gravel driveway, "I need you to understand something. What you're planning, going after Marcus directly, it's dangerous. Not just physically, but legally. If this goes wrong, you could end up being the one who looks unstable." "I know." I helped Isabella out of the car, my shoulders still aching from the dislocation. "But Dr. Kim, he's not going to stop. Not with me, he's not with the other women he's targeting. And the police?" I shook my head. "They need evidence that can't be dismissed as the delusions of an unstable wife." The cabin was small but comfortable with thick walls and no neighbors for half a mile in any direction. As Dr. Kim helped us settle in, I laid out the plan that had been forming in my mind since we'd left the hospital. First, we contact the other women, Linda Patterson and anyone else we can identify from Marcus's research. We need their stories, their evidence, their corroboration. "And then," Isabella asked, "then we give Marcus exactly what he wants." Dr. Kim looked at me with concern. "Elena, what do you mean?" "Marcus's plan requires me to either kill again or have a complete psychological breakdown. Both outcomes put me under his control, either through blackmail or through commitment. But what if there was a third option?" I spread out the printouts from the library on the cabin's kitchen table. "Look at the pattern in his forum posts. He's obsessed with documenting everything. Every manipulation, every psychological pressure point, every phase of his plan. That's his weakness. He can't resist keeping records of his success. You want to use that against him," Dr. Kim said slowly. "I want to make him think his plan is working perfectly while we document everything he does. Make him so confident that he gets careless." Isabella was studying the papers. "Mom, that means putting yourself back in danger. Going home to him." "Not immediately. First, we gather allies." Over the next 3 days from the safety of the cabin, we built our case methodically. Dr. Kim used her professional contacts to reach out to Linda Patterson, who was initially terrified to talk, but eventually agreed to a video call when she realized she wasn't alone. Linda's story was heartbreakingly familiar. Her husband Michael had spent 2 years convincing her she was developing early-onset Alzheimer's, just like her mother. He'd hidden her medications, moved her personal items, and gradually isolated her from her medical colleagues who might have recognized the signs of abuse. "The worst part," Linda told us through tears, "was that I started believing him. I started doubting every memory, every perception. When I found the insurance policies he'd taken out on my life, I almost convinced myself I was being paranoid." "How did you get away?" Isabella asked. "I didn't. Not really. I'm still trapped, just in a different way. Michael knows that if I try to leave or expose him, he'll claim I'm having delusions about my dead husband. Who's going to believe a woman with a documented history of killing her spouse? But Linda had something valuable: records. Michael had been too confident in his control to hide everything perfectly. She'd been secretly copying his computer files, documenting his real activities, building evidence she'd been too afraid to use. "If you're really going to do this," Linda said, "if you're really going to try to stop them, I'll help. I'll testify. I'll share everything I have." By the end of the week, we'd identified and contacted 4 other women in similar situations. Each had a history of surviving abuse. Each had been targeted by men who seemed to know exactly which psychological buttons to push, and each had been systematically isolated and gaslit until they questioned their own sanity. But more importantly, each had evidence. Sarah Martinez, no relation despite the shared name, lived in Chicago and had been married to David Kim for 18 months. She'd discovered his real identity when she'd accidentally seen an email he'd sent to Marcus discussing her progress in phases 2 and 3 of something called the Dependency Protocol. Jennifer Walsh from Detroit had found recordings her husband had made of their private conversations, carefully edited to make her sound unstable and violent. He'd been building a case for her involuntary commitment. Rachel Torres in Phoenix had discovered that her husband had been in contact with her ex-husband's family gathering information about her previous marriage and the restraining order she'd obtained after years of stalking. The pattern was clear, coordinated, and absolutely chilling. This wasn't a group of individual abusers who happened to use similar tactics. This was an organized network sharing strategies, resources, and information. It's like a how-to guide for destroying women who've already survived trauma, Dr. Kim said after we'd compiled all the information. They're specifically targeting survivors because they know which vulnerabilities to exploit. And they're documenting everything because they're proud of it, I added. Marcus posts about me like I'm a case study. Isabella had been quiet during most of these conversations, but now she spoke up. Mom, there's something I need to tell you. About Tyler. I looked at her carefully. What about him? When he grabbed my wrist that night, he said something weird. He said Elena taught you to be suspicious, didn't she? Not you, not your mom. Elena, like he knew you personally. The implications of that hit me like ice water. Tyler knew my name before he started dating you. Which means Marcus has been planning this for longer than 3 years, maybe since before we even met. Dr. Kim was staring at us. Elena, if that's true, then meeting Marcus wasn't a coincidence. He specifically sought you out. I thought back to that first day at the community center, how Marcus had seemed so interested in my background as a psychiatric nurse, how he'd asked so many questions about my experience with trauma patients. At the time, I'd been flattered by his interest. Now I realized I'd been interviewed for the position of victim. Dr. Kim, I need you to help me with something. I need to go back. Back where? Back to Marcus, but not as the woman who ran away 3 days ago. As the woman he's been trying to create. The plan I outlined was risky to the point of seeming suicidal. I would return to Marcus appearing broken and defeated. I would let him think his psychological manipulation had worked, that I was questioning my own sanity and ready to submit to his control. But while I was playing the role of the broken wife, I would be wearing a wire. Every conversation would be recorded. Every manipulation would be documented. Every piece of evidence of his real nature would be preserved. Elena, this is insane, Dr. Kim said. You're talking about putting yourself back in the hands of someone who spent 3 years trying to destroy your mind. Not destroy it. Control it. And now that I know what he's doing, he can't control what he can't manipulate. Isabella was shaking her head. Mom, what if something goes wrong? What if he figures out you're recording him? Then I used the skills I learned 20 years ago. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of what I wasn't saying directly. If Marcus discovered my deception, if he escalated to physical violence the way David had, I was prepared to defend myself with whatever force necessary. Elena, Dr. Kim said carefully, are you talking about killing Marcus? I'm talking about surviving him, whatever that takes. The next morning I called Marcus from a burner phone Dr. Kim had obtained. Elena, oh my God, where have you been? I've been worried sick. His voice was perfect. Relief concerned just a hint of reproach for making him worry. If I hadn't heard his real voice in those forum recordings, I might have been fooled. Marcus, I think I need help. What do you mean, sweetheart? I think I might be having some kind of breakdown. The things I thought I heard, the things I thought I saw, I don't think they were real. The pause was barely perceptible, but I caught it. Marcus calculating adjusting his response to this new development. Oh, honey, where are you? Let me come get you. I'm at Isabella's dorm. Marcus, I'm scared. I don't trust my own mind anymore. That's okay, sweetheart. That's why you have me. Come home and we'll figure this out together. The ease with which he accepted my supposed breakdown told me everything I needed to know. This was exactly what he'd been working toward. Marcus, I need to tell you something. About Isabella. What about her? I think I made up the thing about Tyler being abusive. I think my mind created a threat that wasn't really there because I was feeling paranoid. Another pause. Elena, it's okay. Stress can make us see things that aren't there. That's not your fault. I made Isabella break up with him for no reason. I ruined her relationship because I'm losing my mind. We'll fix it. We'll make it right. Just come home. As I hung up, I felt sick. Not from fear, but from the realization of how easily Marcus had accepted my supposed mental collapse. He'd been so confident in his manipulation that he hadn't questioned my sudden change of perspective. Dr. Kim was attaching the recording device when Isabella grabbed my hand. Mom promised me something. What may? Promise me that if this goes wrong, if Marcus figures out what you're doing, you'll run. Don't try to be a hero. Just run. I looked at my daughter. Not biological, but mine in every way that mattered, and realized I couldn't make that promise. If Marcus was planning to hurt Isabella, if he was grooming her for his network of predators, running wasn't an option. I promise I'll be careful. It wasn't the promise she wanted, but it was the only one I could make. The drive back to my apartment felt like driving toward a battlefield, which in a way it was. For 3 years, Marcus and I had been engaged in a war where only one of us knew we were fighting. Now we both knew. The difference was Marcus thought he'd already won. I parked in my usual spot and took the elevator to the 3rd floor, my heart pounding with each floor we passed. The recording device was virtually invisible, built into a button on my cardigan, but I felt like it was broadcasting my intentions to the world. The apartment door was unlocked. Marcus was waiting for me in his wheelchair, positioned in the living room, with that perfect expression of concerned relief. "Elena, thank God you're okay." I let myself sag against the door, playing the part of a woman at the end of her rope. "Marcus, I think I'm losing my mind." "Come here, sweetheart." I walked to him and he pulled me down to sit on the arm of his wheelchair. His touch felt like spiders crawling across my skin, but I forced myself not to recoil. "Tell me what happened." "I started seeing things that weren't there. Thinking you were lying about your condition, thinking Tyler was abusing Isabella. I even thought—" I let my voice break. "I even thought you were part of some kind of conspiracy." Marcus's arms tightened around me, but I could feel the satisfaction in his touch. "Elena, you've been under so much stress. Taking care of me, worrying about Isabella working at the clinic. It's no wonder your mind started creating threats." But it felt so real. I found what I thought was evidence. I dragged Isabella into it. I made her think Tyler was dangerous. "Where is Isabella now?" "Back at her dorm. She's confused and hurt. She thinks I've lost it completely." "We'll fix that. We'll explain to her that you were having an episode, that it wasn't your fault." The way he said episode made my skin crawl, as if my justified suspicions were a medical condition to be managed. "Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Of course." "Have I been getting worse? Mentally, I mean. Have you noticed me becoming more forgetful, more paranoid?" This was the opening Marcus had been waiting for. I could practically see him organizing his thoughts, preparing to deliver the kill shot to whatever remained of my self-confidence. "Elena, I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to scare you. But yes, I've been worried about you for months." "What kind of things have you noticed?" "Memory lapses. You'd forget conversations we'd had, appointments you'd made. You started misplacing things and then accusing me of moving them. And the paranoia." He paused, stroking my hair with false tenderness. "Sweetheart, you've been suspicious of everyone. Your co-workers, Isabella's friends, even me. But you never said anything." "I was hoping it would get better on its own. I know how proud you are, how much your independence means to you. I didn't want to take that away from you." The manipulation was so smooth, so caring in its delivery. If I hadn't known what he really was, I might have been grateful for his patience with my supposed mental decline. "Marcus, what if it's not stress? What if it's something serious, like what happened to my mother?" My mother had indeed developed dementia in her final years, a fact Marcus had clearly researched and was now prepared to exploit. "We'll get you evaluated, properly evaluated by specialists who can help." "What kind of specialists?" "Neurologists, psychiatrists, people who understand what you're going through." People who could have me committed if Marcus presented the right evidence of my instability. "I'm scared, Marcus." "I know, sweetheart, but you don't have to be. I'm going to take care of everything." That night, as I lay in bed listening to Marcus's breathing beside me, I processed what I'd learned. Marcus's confidence was absolute. He believed he'd successfully driven me to the edge of a breakdown, and now he was positioning himself as my savior, the devoted husband who would manage my mental health crisis with patience and compassion. But I'd also learned something else. Marcus's plan wasn't finished. He'd mentioned specialists' evaluations treatment. He was planning to have me professionally diagnosed as unstable, creating a legal framework for controlling every aspect of my life. The next morning, Marcus was unusually attentive. He made breakfast, helped me with my morning routine, and spoke to me in the gentle, patient tone people use with children or the mentally impaired. "Elena, I've been thinking about what we discussed last night. I think it would be helpful if you took some time off from the clinic." "Time off?" "Just until we get you feeling better. Dr. Martinez says that work stress can exacerbate cognitive issues." Dr. Martinez was Marcus's primary care physician, who I'd never actually met despite 3 years of marriage. Everything I knew about Marcus's medical care came from Marcus himself. "I need to work, Marcus. It's important to me." I know, sweetheart, but right now your health is more important. I've already called Dr. Williams about getting you an appointment. My blood went cold. Who is Dr. Williams? A psychiatrist who specializes in cases like yours. Age-related cognitive decline, stress-induced paranoia. She's very understanding. Cases like mine. Marcus had already discussed my supposed condition with a psychiatrist, probably providing carefully curated examples of my erratic behavior. When is the appointment? Tomorrow afternoon. I'll drive you. Of course he would. He wouldn't risk me talking to Dr. Williams alone without his interpretation of my symptoms. That afternoon, while Marcus was supposedly at a medical appointment of his own, I called the clinic where I worked. Elena, my supervisor Janet, sounded surprised to hear from me. How are you feeling? Feeling. Your husband called yesterday. He said you'd been having some health issues and needed to take extended leave. The recording device was getting everything, but I felt the familiar chill of Marcus's manipulation closing around me like a trap. Janet, I haven't been having health issues. I never asked for extended leave. There was a retry JN continue edit. There was a pause. Elena, that's exactly what your husband said you might say. He mentioned that you've been having some confusion about recent events. The trap was even more sophisticated than I'd realized. Marcus hadn't just called my work to arrange leave. He'd preemptively explained that I would deny having health problems, making my denial itself seem like evidence of my mental instability. Janet, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am not sick. My husband is lying to you. Elena, honey, maybe you should talk to someone professional about this. Your husband mentioned that you've been having paranoid thoughts about him. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking with rage rather than fear. Marcus had poisoned even my workplace relationships, turning my own supervisor into an unwitting accomplice in his manipulation. But he'd also made a mistake. By moving so quickly to isolate me from work by arranging a psychiatric evaluation without my knowledge, he was showing his hand. The patient-methodical approach he'd used for 3 years was giving way to urgency, which meant he was planning something that required me to be completely under his control soon. My phone buzzed with a text from Isabella Mom Tyler showed up at my dorm today. He wants to apologize and says you told him where to find me. My blood turned to ice. I had never told Tyler where Isabella lived, but Marcus knew. I called Isabella immediately. Isabella, where are you right now? In my room, but Tyler's in the lobby. The RA won't let him come up, but he says he's not leaving until I talk to him. Listen to me very carefully. Pack a bag right now, only essentials, and get out of there through whatever exit doesn't go past the lobby. Mom, you're scaring me. Good, you should be scared. Tyler being there isn't a coincidence. This is part of Marcus's plan. What plan? Before I could answer, I heard Marcus's key in the front door. He was back early from his supposed appointment. Isabella, I have to go. Get out of your dorm now and call Dr. Kim. Stay with her until you hear from me. I hung up and quickly hid my phone as Marcus wheeled into the apartment. How was your appointment? I asked, forcing my voice to sound normal. Good. Dr. Patterson says I'm making excellent progress. The irony of his lie wasn't lost on me. Dr. Patterson had told Dr. Kim months ago that Marcus had been cleared for full activity. How was your day, sweetheart? Quiet. I tried to call the clinic, but I got confused about my schedule. Marcus's eyes sharpened slightly. What kind of confusion? I thought I was supposed to work today, but Janet said you'd arranged for me to take time off. I don't remember you doing that. We talked about it last night, Elena. You said you were feeling overwhelmed. Did I let confusion creep into my voice. I don't remember that conversation. That's exactly what I'm worried about. Marcus moved his wheelchair closer to me. Elena, the memory lapses are getting worse. What if it's not memory lapses? What if you're lying to me? The words came out before I could stop them, carrying more edge than I'd intended. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Elena, do you hear yourself? You're accusing me of lying about taking care of you. That's exactly the kind of paranoid thinking Dr. Williams needs to evaluate. I don't want to see Dr. Williams. Sweetheart, you don't get to make that decision anymore. You're not capable of making medical decisions for yourself right now. There it was, the admission I'd been waiting for. Marcus believed he now had legal authority over my medical care, which meant he'd been building a case for having me declared mentally incompetent. What do you mean I don't get to decide? Elena, you're clearly having a psychotic episode. You've accused me of elaborate conspiracies. You've alienated Isabella from her boyfriend. You've missed work because you can't remember your own schedule. Any competent psychiatrist would recommend immediate evaluation and possible hospitalization. The mask was slipping. The concerned patient husband was being replaced by someone colder, more calculating. And if I refuse, then I'll have to make the decision for you. As your husband, I have the legal right to arrange emergency psychiatric care if you're a danger to yourself or others. A danger to others? Marcus's smile was chilling. Elena, you have a history of violence. 20 years ago, you killed your first husband. Now you're showing signs of the same kind of paranoid delusions that led to that violence. Any psychiatrist would consider you a significant risk. The recording device was capturing everything, but I realized with growing horror that Marcus was building a case that might actually work. A woman with a history of killing her spouse now showing signs of mental instability, whose own husband was requesting emergency psychiatric intervention. Marcus, I killed David in self-defense, you know that. I know that's what you told the court. But Elena, you've been lying to yourself for 20 years. David wasn't abusing you. You killed him because you couldn't control him, and now you're trying to do the same thing to me. The gaslighting was so complete, so convincing that for a moment I almost doubted myself. Almost. That's not true. Isn't it? Think about it, Elena. David tried to leave you, and you killed him. Now I'm trying to get you help, and you're accusing me of conspiracy. The pattern is obvious. My phone buzzed with another text. Marcus glanced at it, then back at me. Who's texting you, Elena? I don't know. Probably a wrong number. Marcus wheeled over and picked up my phone before I could stop him. His face went very still as he read the message. Dr. Kim wants to know if you're safe, he said quietly. Why would Dr. Kim be checking on your safety, Elena? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I don't know. You've been talking to Dr. Kim about me, haven't you? There was no point in lying anymore. Marcus knew. Yes. What did you tell her? The truth. Marcus was silent for a long moment, studying my face with the intensity of a scientist examining a specimen. Elena, do you remember what I told you 3 years ago when we first started dating, about my ex-wife? I did remember. Marcus had said his ex-wife had become paranoid and unstable, that she'd eventually had to be hospitalized for her own safety. I told you she developed paranoid delusions about me, that she started recording our conversations following me trying to prove I was lying about things. She became obsessed with the idea that I was part of some kind of conspiracy against her. The parallel was too perfect to be coincidental. Marcus, did you have an ex-wife? Oh yes, her name was Patricia. She was a lovely woman until the paranoia took hold. Very sad case. She's still in long-term psychiatric care, last I heard. What did you do to her? The same thing I did to you, Elena. I helped her understand who she really was. Marcus stood up from his wheelchair. Just stood up as if he'd never been disabled at all. You see, Elena, the beautiful thing about targeting women with your particular background is that you're already primed for guilt and self-doubt. You've already killed once, so when you start having violent thoughts again, you question your own sanity instead of trusting your instincts. I backed toward the kitchen, my mind racing through possible escape routes. The support group I told you about, it's real, but it's not for chronic pain. It's for men who enjoy the challenge of breaking strong women. Women like you who think they're survivors. Marcus followed me, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd never had mobility issues. Dr. Williams is real too. She specializes in cases like yours. Women who've killed before and are showing signs of doing it again. She's very understanding of the need for immediate long-term psychiatric care. The other women? Linda, Sarah, Jennifer, Rachel, all safely contained now. All receiving the care they need for their violent tendencies and paranoid delusions. I felt behind me for the knife block on the kitchen counter. Elena, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. It was displaying a live video feed of Isabella's dorm room. She was there packing a bag just as I'd told her to do. Tyler's been waiting for my signal. One word from me and Isabella learns exactly what happened to her father, and what's going to happen to her. My hand froze on the knife handle. You see, Elena, I've been planning this moment for 3 years. Every conversation we've had has been recorded. Every text you've sent has been monitored. Every friend you've talked to has been contacted and told about your declining mental state. Marcus moved closer, confident now that Isabella's safety was ensuring my compliance. The beautiful thing is, no one will be surprised when you have your final breakdown. When you attack me, the same way you attacked David. The only difference is this time there will be witnesses. This time there will be video evidence of your violent, unprovoked assault. I looked around the kitchen and realized that Marcus was right. There were cameras I'd never noticed positioned to capture every angle of the room. And when you're safely in long-term psychiatric care, Isabella will need someone to take care of her. Someone who understands her family history of violence and mental instability. Tyler's very good at his job. He specializes in young women who need guidance, who need someone to help them understand their place in the world. The full scope of Marcus's plan crystallized in my mind. He wasn't just destroying me. He was setting up Isabella to be his next victim, or Tyler's, or someone else in their network. Elena, you have a choice to make. You can fight me, and Isabella pays the price. Or you can accept what you are, a mentally ill woman who needs professional help, and Isabella gets to live her life safely if under careful supervision. I looked at Marcus standing there in our kitchen with absolute confidence in his control over the situation. He'd planned everything perfectly, except for one thing. He'd underestimated what I was willing to do to protect Isabella. Marcus, I need to tell you something. What's that, sweetheart? 20 years ago when I killed David, I learned something about myself. What did you learn? I smiled, and for the first time in 3 years, it was completely genuine. I learned that I'm very, very good at it. The knife was in my hand before Marcus could react. But instead of attacking him, I turned it toward the camera mounted on the wall behind me. Isabella, if you can hear this, run. Now! I smashed the camera, then turned toward Marcus. But he was already moving faster than someone with supposed mobility issues should have been able to move. The fight that followed was nothing like my confrontation with David 20 years earlier. David had been drunk sloppy, relying on size and rage. Marcus was coldly calculating, trained, prepared. But I had one advantage Marcus hadn't counted on. I was fighting for Isabella's life, not just my own. And that made me more dangerous than he'd calculated. The kitchen became a battlefield. Marcus tried to pin me against the counter, but I'd spent 20 years working with psychiatric patients. I knew how to handle people who were trying to hurt me. More importantly, I knew where the cameras were now. And I knew Marcus needed this fight to look like an unprovoked attack by an unstable woman. So I gave him exactly what he wanted while making sure the cameras captured something else entirely. "Help me!" I screamed as Marcus grabbed for the knife. "He's been lying about everything. He's not disabled. He's been planning this." To anyone watching the footage, it would look like Marcus was defending himself against a paranoid woman having a violent breakdown, but the audio would tell a different story. "Elena, calm down!" Marcus shouted back, playing his part perfectly. "You're having an episode." But as we struggled, I managed to grab my phone from the counter. The recording device was still running, still capturing everything. "Marcus Chen," I said clearly, looking directly into one of the remaining cameras, "killed his ex-wife Patricia and made it look like a suicide. He's part of a network that targets survivor women. Tyler Brooks is waiting to kill Isabella Martinez at the University of Minnesota." Marcus's eyes went wide with rage. He'd spent 3 years building the perfect crime, and I was destroying it in 30 seconds. "You crazy bitch," he snarled, dropping the concerned husband act entirely. "There it is," I said to the camera. "There's the real Marcus Chen." That's when Marcus made his final mistake. Instead of continuing to play the role of the concerned husband defending himself, he let his anger take control. He tried to kill me. Not subdue me, not restrain me until help arrived. Kill me, and that changed everything. The knife fight that followed was brutal and desperate. But this time I wasn't a terrified woman fighting for her life against an abusive husband. I was a trained psychiatric nurse who'd spent decades dealing with violent patients, fighting against a predator who'd spent 3 years systematically destroying my mind. When it was over, Marcus was on the kitchen floor, bleeding from multiple stab wounds, and I was standing over him holding the knife, looking directly into his remaining camera. "My name is Elena Martinez," I said clearly. "I am not mentally ill, I am not paranoid, and I am not a victim." I called 911, then Dr. Kim, then Isabella. "Mom?" Isabella's voice was shaky but safe. "Sweetheart, where are you?" "With Dr. Kim. Tyler tried to get into the building, but security stopped him." "Mom, are you okay?" I looked down at Marcus, who was unconscious but breathing. "I'm perfect, sweetheart. And you're safe." What happened? I remembered who I was before Marcus tried to make me forget. The police arrived within minutes, followed by paramedics. As they worked on Marcus, Detective Ray Wilson, the same detective who'd handled David's case 20 years earlier, sat down across from me in the living room. "Elena, I need you to tell me what happened here." I handed him my phone, still recording everything. "It's all there, Detective. Every word, every manipulation, every threat. Marcus Chen has been running a network that targets women who've survived domestic violence. He's been systematically destroying their mental health as part of an elaborate psychological experiment." Detective Wilson listened to portions of the recording, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "Elena, this is one of the most sophisticated cases of psychological abuse I've ever seen. Detective Marcus said there were other women. Linda Patterson, Sarah Martinez, Jennifer Walsh, Rachel Torres. They've all been institutionalized or isolated based on false psychiatric evaluations. We'll investigate every case. And Detective Tyler Brooks is still out there. He's part of their network, and he was targeting my daughter." Within hours, the story began to unravel completely. Tyler was arrested attempting to break into Isabella's dorm. Linda Patterson was released from psychiatric care when her husband Michael Torres was arrested for fraud and false imprisonment. Sarah, Jennifer, and Rachel were all found to be victims of similar schemes. The forum where Marcus and his associates had documented their crimes became evidence in what prosecutors called one of the largest organized psychological abuse cases in U.S. history. But for me, the most important moment came 3 days later when Isabella and I were finally alone in Dr. Kim's office. "Mom, I need to ask you something." "Anything." "When you killed Marcus, did it feel the same as when you killed David?" I thought about the question carefully. "No, sweetheart. When I killed David, I felt like I had no choice. I was trapped, desperate, fighting for my life at the last possible moment. And with Marcus? With Marcus, I made a choice. I chose to fight back before I was trapped. I chose to protect you before you were hurt. I chose to stop a predator before he could destroy more lives." Isabella was quiet for a moment. "Do you regret it?" "I regret that it was necessary. But no, I don't regret saving your life. I don't regret saving the lives of the other women he would have targeted. And I don't regret stopping a network of predators who saw women like us as nothing more than interesting psychological experiments." What happens now? Now we heal, and we help other women recognize the signs of this kind of abuse before it's too late. 6 months later, I was standing in front of a conference room full of domestic violence counselors, law enforcement officers, and mental health professionals, teaching them to recognize the sophisticated psychological manipulation tactics that Marcus and his network had perfected. "The key thing to understand," I told the audience, "is that these predators specifically target survivors because they know our vulnerabilities. They know we've already been trained to doubt ourselves, to accept blame for other people's violence, to sacrifice ourselves for the people we love. But they also underestimate us. They see our survival as weakness, our compassion as manipulation to be exploited. They don't understand that the same strength that helped us survive once can help us fight back when we recognize what's happening." After my presentation, a young woman approached me, a counselor who worked with abuse survivors. "Ms. Martinez, I have a client who's been describing things that sound a lot like what you experienced. Subtle manipulation, gaslighting, isolation disguised as concern. But her husband seems so normal, so caring." "They always do," I said. "That's what makes them so dangerous. But tell your client something for me." "What's that?" "Tell her that her instincts matter. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And tell her that she's stronger than whoever is trying to control her, even if she doesn't feel strong right now." "Will you talk to her?" "Of course." As I walked to my car that evening, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me to this moment. 3 years ago, I'd been a woman slowly disappearing under the weight of someone else's manipulation. I'd believed I was losing my mind, questioning my own perceptions, accepting that I was becoming the mentally unstable woman Marcus wanted me to be. Now I was someone who helped other women recognize their own strength before it was too late. Marcus Chen was serving life in prison without the possibility of parole. Tyler Brooks and the other members of their network were serving sentences ranging from 10 to 25 years. The forum where they'd documented their crimes had been shut down, but not before investigators had used it to identify and rescue dozens of other victims. Isabella was thriving in college, having learned to trust her instincts about relationships and to recognize the difference between love and control. She'd also become an advocate for other young women sharing her story and helping them recognize warning signs she'd almost missed. "Mom," she'd said recently, "do you think what happened to us was worth it? I mean, all the pain we went through, all the fear." "Sweetheart, our pain was never supposed to be worth anything to anyone. Marcus and his friends saw our trauma as entertainment, our healing as a challenge to overcome. But do you think some good came out of it?" I considered the question. "I think we turned something evil into something powerful. We took their weapon against us and made it into armor for other women. And the other victims, the women we helped. They're all survivors now, not victims. And they're all helping other women recognize that survival is possible." That night, as I sat in my small apartment, the same building but a different unit, one that Marcus had never contaminated with his presence, I reflected on the difference between the woman I'd been and the woman I'd become. I'd learned that strength wasn't about never being afraid. It was about acting in spite of fear when the people you loved were threatened. I'd learned that survival wasn't about enduring pain silently. It was about refusing to let someone else's cruelty define your reality. Most importantly, I'd learned that the same qualities that made me vulnerable to manipulation, my compassion, my desire to help others, my willingness to sacrifice for the people I loved, were also the qualities that made me dangerous to predators. Marcus had seen my history of surviving abuse as a weakness to exploit. He'd been wrong. It was the source of my greatest strength. And now, instead of being someone who survived trauma, I was someone who helped other women become survivors. My phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. "Mom, there's a woman at my school who needs help. Her boyfriend is showing the warning signs. Can you talk to her?" I smiled and typed back, "Of course. Have her call me anytime, because that's what survivors do. We protect each other. We refuse to let predators win. And we make sure that every woman who's being told she's crazy, paranoid, or losing her mind knows the truth. She's not crazy. She's being systematically destroyed by someone who sees her compassion as weakness. But compassion, when it's backed by the kind of strength that comes from surviving the unthinkable, can be the most dangerous weapon of all. At least it can be when it's wielded by someone who remembers who she was before someone else tried to tell her who she should be. My name is Elena Martinez. I am not a victim. I am not mentally ill. I am not paranoid. I am a survivor. And I'm exactly who I was always meant to be." The end. Thank you for watching this story unfold. If you or someone you know is experiencing psychological abuse, please know that your instincts matter, your perceptions are valid, and help is available. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of survival and strength, and let me know in the comments what resonated most with you about Elena's journey.